Really glad to see everybody here today. We are hosting our 11th Let's Talk Ghost Gear. And today the topic is on methods to remove abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear from aquatic environments. And so with this call, we will be recording it to post on our YouTube channel for later viewing if folks were not able to attend in real time. And the goal with these webinars is to showcase the expertise of the members that we do have by bringing them on to present on their area of expertise, and then we'll have some questions afterwards. So a little bit of housekeeping. I will ask everyone if they are not talking or presenting to keep themselves on mute for now. And then at the end, we'll have a question period with our panel presenters. We have 5 panel presenters today from different areas around the world. And each presenter will have 10 minutes to present. So for my presenters, I will be a little strict on the timekeeping. However, if there are things you don't get to in your presentation, that is great because we can ask questions about them afterwards and we'll have lots of time for discussion. So I think we'll probably have about 50 minutes of presentations and probably over 30 minutes for questions and discussions. So please hold all questions till the end. And I am going to go ahead and introduce our presenters, unless there's anything I've missed, Joel, from the usual ramble, because I don't have my notes with me.
No problem, Katie. That's good. Go for it.
Okay, great. So we have Colin from CSR GeoSurveys in Eastern Canada. We have James Morioka from the oh my goodness, James, I'm not going to say this right. The Papahānaumokuākea Marine Debris Program in Hawaii. We have Buzz from Oceanswide in the Eastern United States. Katie from Beyond the Reef from the British Virgin Isles. And we also have Bourton from Emerald Sea Protection Society here in Western Canada. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Colin so that he can start his presentation.
Okay, thanks for the introduction there, Katie. Um, Nice to see. I recognized a few folks on the list, so that's kind of neat. As spend some time at these conferences and get to meet more people that think alike. Might as well get right to the presentation. So Katie asked me to speak today, I guess, on methods to remove ALDFG in aquatic environments. So first off, an introduction. My name is Colin Toole. I'm with CSR GeoSurveys. We're a private survey company, really, based in Nova Scotia, Canada, and specialize in geophysics. So that things like side scan and multi-beam and some of these marine technologies is really our bread and butter. And we found ourselves tied up in several ghost gear projects the last few years. Mostly through funding with DFO and the Ghost Gear Fund. And, we've worked with Joel and the Triple GI and Ocean Conservancy on a few projects. So since 2020, we've built up a fair amount of experience on both surveying, the identification of ghost gear and also the removal of it from aquatic environments. So go to the next slide there, please. Just a little background so you know where I'm coming from here. This slide I've used before in other presentations, but as you can see, we've done several projects related to the survey, retrieval, and disposal of ghost gear. A lot of them are focused on lobster gear, Eastern Canada, Northeast US. Lobster fishery is kind of king in a lot of spots. And there's a lot of loss when it comes to lobster fishery. Also crab gear, so snow crab gear in the Gulf of St. Lawrence particularly, and gill nets we've also gone after on a few different projects. So we've got a fair bit of experience going after different types of gear and also experience on how to recover these types of gear. So our projects are mostly some research-based modeling and planning. That's kind of ahead of the field work process. Then we go out and we do, for the most part, side scan surveys to look for gear. Also some ROV work, and then obviously we do the ghost gear retrievals. And most all of our projects end with recycling and or disposal of what we bring up. Next. To talk about the removal of gear, I kind of had to throw in a bit of the detection of gear just to give you guys an idea on the process. So real quick, this is some of the technology we use to find it. Obviously, the side scan sonar is kind of our primary tool. We've also used multi-beam sonar, and we've used ROVs to locate ghost gear. I know there's a lot of groups out there that use divers and whatnot. We've had divers on a couple jobs. And then really the process is we go out, we survey, we map targets, using pre-planned survey lines, trying to find hot spots on where the gear is located. We map these targets in real time. And one real key aspect on the removal of gear is you need to do good survey work. So those locations, the targets that you pick are accurate. And you're not wasting a lot of time when you go back to those sites to try and recover the gear. So, don't skip the positioning accuracies and the layback calculations and all those different things that you do to make sure your survey data is accurate. Next. A few examples on what we see before we start the removal process, the retrieval of gear. So these are examples of lobster traps that we found. I'd say these are probably in the Bay of Fundy, so fairly deep water. You can see the example on the right is a really good example of what a trawl would look like. So, I mean, there's probably 15 to 20 traps in that area. Most likely they're all attached with one main ground line. And it's really that ground line that we are targeting for retrievals. Because if we can hook into that ground line, all those traps for the most part are going to come up with it. So when we do go after ghost gear, when we can, we try and target fisheries that use trawls or multiple traps connected to one main rope, and it makes the retrieval obviously highly efficient when you can get one rope and you got 15 or 20 traps on it. But it also makes it much easier. So an example like that on the right, we would, once we've mapped it and we know the orientation of this trawl on the bottom, we would run a grapnel perpendicular to that, right? And our goal and our objective is to try and catch the main line, right? And once we get a hold of that, then majority of it comes up with it. Next. Just a couple more examples. This is crab pot trawl over in the CFA 12, which is the Gulf of St. Lawrence snow crab. And you can see there on that side scan image, there's 4 pots on that main line, right? So again, when we're doing removals, we target, we would run our grapnel planned lines perpendicular to this target, and our objective is to try and catch that main line with the grapnel, which we're going to show you the grapnel here in a second. Because trying to pick one of these pots off, a single pot in 100 meters of water is a challenging thing. I mean, we do that, but obviously when we can, most of the time we're aiming for the rope to recover the gear. So on the left there's just examples of single pots that we've recovered. And that's another reason why you need really good survey data, because these are really small targets in a big ocean and deep water, right? So if your survey positioning of these targets is bad, you're going to have a real hard time trying to recover them. So next. The survey process this is for survey and retrievals, but you can see we'd have we'd have a topside computer side scan navigation software running, up on the boat, which we're mapping targets in real time. We're using planned lines, as you can see in that image on the right. Those are planned track lines, and then all those little dots, they're targets that we would pick as we're surveying along those lines. with layback calculations and everything involved. So it would put a location on our screen where, you know, we believe ghost gear to be, right? And so once we do the survey part, then we come back with the grapnel and we hit those targets. And you can see the bottom left image. That is what we see on screen. So we've got a boat. We've got our target mapped on the bottom. And then we try and bring that boat and that grapnel over top of that target. And the objective is, like I said, for the most part, trying to catch the rope, which is almost always associated with either a trap or a pot. You know, so it's almost like, you know, fishing for fishing gear, right? And the more accurate your target is, the more accurate you can bring the grapnel over top of the higher the efficiency of your retrievals will be. Next. So here's some of this is the good stuff when it comes to removing of ghost gear. So tow grapnel, probably 90% of our retrieval operations, we use a device like this. You know, this is a lot of jobs we do are in deep water with high currents. So this is a heavy design grapnel with, you know, strong steel chains. That main beam that you see that connects all that, that's a solid steel beam. That takes a lot of force, obviously dragging along the bottom. And when you hook into some of this gear, it's heavy, right? So you need heavy gear. There's obviously A-frames and, you know, hydraulic winches that we use to deploy this and retrieve it. But that setup right there probably weighs 2,000 pounds. So it's capable of getting to the bottom in like 150 meters of water in places like the Bay of Fundy where you have high currents. And as you can see, it's really good at catching rope, right? So that rope is, you know, really what we're targeting when we're going after these retrievals. But as you can see, it can hook into traps too, right? I mean, we've got 6 or 7 traps in that one image. The image on the right, that's really just a picture of a boom on the boat that we use to lift lobster gear off of the grapnel once we get it up on deck. So I think I touched on all that. It's designed to catch rope. You can see those thin blades on the grapnel. They're really thin and they come to a very sharp point. So when the rope gets in there under stress, it gets stuck in there. It's heavy for deep water. We also have lighter setups too. Don't get me wrong. We've got a few different setups, but lighter ones for shallower water, designed to catch multiple traps. Safety is really important. So if you get yourself into these kind of jobs, make sure that safety comes first. Hard hats, gloves. You need experienced deckhands because, you know, this stuff can take you to the bottom real quick too, right? Yeah, and a vessel boom is always handy once you get the gear up to start picking traps off of that grapnel. Next. So this is an example of how much time do I have here, Katie?
A little under 1 minute.
Okay, I'll hurry up. So once we get the gear up on the trap hauler or on the grapnel, we use the hauler on the vessel to pull most of it in. So we'll bring the ropes over to the hauler to pull it on the boat. As you can see, we're actually bringing in a gill net with the hauler there. We brought in steel cable with the hauler. This is like a lobster hauler, right? A hydraulic trap, you know, hauler. You know, one rope at a time up through the hauler. As I said, it can retrieve rope, net, steel cables. Again, safety is critical. And you can actually run stuff through the hauler directly into net bags that you can use to then just remove it all off the boat in one big pile. Next. Real quick, ROV. We do maybe 10% of our retrievals with ROV. You mostly shallow water, rocky areas will use ROV where the grapnel isn't really suitable. We've got scanning sonar on our ROV, so you can see that one sonar image. That's a lobster trap. We use that scanning sonar to navigate to the gear when it's on the bottom. Cable management's huge because these small ROVs, the cable gets heavy, so you have to have proper management so you can fly the thing properly. Next. Here's some examples of what we'd see with our ROV. So we've got a hook on it. Once we locate it with the scanning sonar, we fly to the gear with the hook. We hook in to the gear, and then the hook actually is released from the ROV, and then there's basically just a recovery rope on the hook that we then can pull the gear up on deck with. So The ROV is really just used to visually find it, to hook onto it, and then we use a rope to bring it on, right? The ROV isn't actually bringing it up to the surface. Next. And that's the end. There's just a pile of gear that we pulled out of the Bay of Fundy one year, and our good buddy Nathan giving us a thumbs up on all the rope that we removed from the ocean. So that's it for me, and I guess questions will come at the end.
Do I jump in right here, Katie?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Colin, or thanks so much, Colin, for your presentation. And yeah, James, it is your turn.
Aloha, everybody. My name is James Morioka, and I'm the executive director and co-founder of the Hawaii-based nonprofit organization, the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Debris Project. And so today I'll be talking to you guys about methods to remove ALDFG from shallow coral reef environments. Next. For those that are unfamiliar with Papahānaumokuākea, it's the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. It's 1,200 miles of islands and atolls, which are remote, uninhabited, and protected specifically for the wildlife and the habitat. Next. Papahānaumokuākea in the Hawaiian archipelago is the most remote archipelago in the world, and it lies central in the North Pacific Ocean within the North Pacific Gyre. And so you can kind of see here that if you overlay the Hawaiian Islands over the continental US, it actually spans, almost the entire East Coast to West Coast. So it's a very large area that our small organization protects. Next. A couple of fun facts about Papahānaumokuākea. It's the largest fully protected conservation area in the world. It's 75% of the Hawaiian archipelago, a place that's rarely known to the public. And it's gotten a ton of protection over the years. So it is the only UNESCO Mixed World Heritage Site for both its nature and culture. And just recently, Papahānaumokuākea was upgraded from a Marine National Monument to a National Marine Sanctuary. Next. It's also home to 7,000 marine species, a quarter of which are found nowhere else in the world. It's once been quoted as being the top predator-dominated ecosystem in the world, where 54% of total biomass consists of apex predators. It's also home to 70% of the United States coral reefs. And if you think of all the land mass in Papahānaumokuākea, it's about 6 square miles of land, so the size of LAX International Airport. But there's 1,200 square miles of shallow coral reef habitat, so 200 times that. Next. Because of our location in the North Pacific Gyre, we collect 115,000 pounds or 52 metric tons of fishing nets from the North Pacific Ocean, from specifically North Pacific fisheries. And what we're working with is primarily trawl or purse seine ghost gear. Next. And so we see ALDFG on coral reefs. Next. We see wildlife entangled in ALDFG in the water. Next. We also see coral reef damage from ALDFG. Next. But also the wildlife on shore on the 6 square kilometer or 6 square miles of land is having to compete with a lot of this ALDFG. Next. And if the wildlife is lucky enough to rip off a part of this ALDFG from the coral reefs and make it to shore, we're able to disentangle a lot of these endangered Hawaiian monk seals and green sea turtles. Next. So our nonprofit organization is based here in Kailua, and we're dedicated to protecting Papahānaumokuākea. And this is an incredibly large area, and what we feel like we can do is to remove marine debris by hand. And so all of this is done with specialized free divers and small boat operators, and it's all done manually. Next. So we work at 7 of the 10 primary islands and atolls within Papahānaumokuākea. Next. And our job is to detect, cut, lift, and transport this marine debris from the coral reef environment. And over the last 4 years, we've been able to remove over 1 million pounds or nearly 500,000 kilograms of this derelict fishing net, 80% which came from in-water derelict fishing nets. Next. When you're working with an incredibly large area like these ancient atolls, which may be longer than 10 miles wide and 10 miles long. Efficiency is the name of the game. Next. And we work in these incredibly complex, shallow, intricate coral reef mazes. Next. And so to navigate this, we have to use inflatable boats. So fully inflatable Zodiac boats with twin outboard engines to give us a very shallow draft. So we're working in less than 12 inches of water a lot of times. And on an extremely low tide, the reef is exposed. So it's really, really hard to get in there with any kind of boat or powered assisted gear to be able to lift this out of the water. So we have to do this all manually. Next. And so how we plan is we use spatial data, GIS. Next, we're able to convert the satellite image and digitize each of the reefs. We have 25 years of historical data, so we know where this marine debris or this net accumulates on the reef. Next. And then in water, we also use towboard surveys, which are 2 divers or free divers that are towed at 1 to 2 knots behind our inflatable boats, which can cover a large area of shallow coral reef. Next. But a lot of the times the boats cannot get over this coral reef, so we have to swim it manually. And to assist us, we use DPVs or diver propulsion vehicles. But there are limitations to manually swimming where we can only really survey about 1/4 of a square kilometer per day. Next. So what we try and do is we try and detect at least the high priority derelict fishing nets from the air using UAVs. And you can kind of see a green net right there in like the top left side. Next. But there are limitations to aerial surveys because detection of the ALDFG on coral reefs is very difficult. Over time, a lot of this ALDFG starts to look exactly like the habitat. And so unless you fly with low altitude and high resolution, it's really hard to detect this stuff. Next. So you can kind of see here, there's a long line from the exposed reef of a small little bundle of net. This is captured with an RGB or red, green, blue sensor from our UAV. Next. But we also use multispectral sensors too. So the red edge, green, and near infrared. And depending on the type of net and the depth of the net, it's really hard to select one of these images or one of these sensors to be able to detect this net from the coral reefs. Next. There has been some promise using infrared, but we are going to try and use hyperspectral sensors as well. Next. All right, the biggest hurdle that we have or biggest challenge that we have to removing a lot of this derelict fishing net is cutting. And so it is very energy and time consumptive. The largest net we've ever removed was 11.5 tons, so 23,000 pounds. And it took our free divers 4 days to cut it into manageable, like 500 to 800 pound chunks so we can manually lift them into the inflatable boat. Next. And as you can kind of see here, a lot of these nets are these massive conglomerates of all different types of fishing nets, material types, diameters, and it's really hard to create tension to cut a lot of these net bundles. Next. All right, the next challenge is lifting. So we use these fully inflatable Zodiacs, so we're not able to use cranes, A-frames, winches, davits. And so all this stuff is cut into 500 to 800 pound chunks, and our team of divers manually lifts them into the boat. Next. And as you can kind of see here, you can do some nets with 2 people, 4 people, but some nets take more than 8 people to get them into the boats. Next. And then there's transport. So we fully load our boats with about 4,000 pounds of nets, and then we have to navigate through the really shallow reef, fully loaded, go through surf channels, go out to the open ocean where we go to our support vessel, which is a large ship that we live on, and we have to have this stuff craned out of our boats. Next. And then, yeah, when it comes to craning, it's obviously inherently dangerous when you're picking over 4,000 pounds of nets from your inflatable boats in the open ocean. Next. And then these nets are stored in custom marine debris storage bins on the deck for them to desiccate, and then these bins are craned off whole and transported to disposal, where we can either repurpose them, convert them to energy, or repurpose or recycle them into roads and cement blocks. Next. At the end of a trip, after end of 30 days, we should be able to remove over 100,000 pounds. So the boat should look like this, or next, or look like this, with our team of 16 divers over 30 days. All right, next. And then a lot of times we're able to disentangle and rescue wildlife from this ALDFG. And so over the last 4 years, we've disentangled and rescued 4 green sea turtles and 3 endangered Hawaiian monk seals. Next. This is kind of our accomplishment list over the last 4.5 years. We removed over 1 million pounds over 260 days of operation. Last year, we removed more than 330,000 pounds over 77 days. Next. We were recently published in Science that proves that a lot of this marine debris removal efforts having positive benefits to Hawaiian monk seals, and we were graced with being on the cover, which was pretty cool too. Next. So right now we're also funded to develop innovative tools and technologies to improve operational efficiency. So with the detection side, we're using UAVs with different sensors to locate wildlife entangled in ALDFG. I think that's our priority, because it could be, only a matter of hours that this wildlife may be alive if we don't disentangle them. We also use diver propulsion vehicles to expedite the surveys, which allows us to survey more area and then conserve energy and time, which can be used for cutting and lifting. When it comes to cutting, we're developing a new manual and powered cutting tool. So right now it's a reciprocating sawzall underwater, to extend the stroke length and put an opposing blade so we can create tension and expedite cutting large nets into these manageable chunks. And then we're developing a heavy duty extraction platform to expedite the removal of these really, really large nets. So if you don't got to cut, you can lift it whole. And then when it comes to disposal, I did mention that we use waste to energy or waste to infrastructure methods to dispose of this ALDFG. And all of the designs and prototypes will be made publicly available to the global marine debris community, probably at the end of 2026. All right, next. This is a video. I'm not sure it's going to play, but this is kind of the extraction platform that we've decided to design, which is a modular pontoon boat with a landing craft gate, a series of A-frames, and we're able to then drag the nets out of the water and then into our Zodiac so then we can safely navigate to the boat and have the loads craned out.
James, I actually didn't realize that was a video, so that'll be on me for not importing it properly. That is a screenshot. But if we want to make it available afterwards to anyone, just let me know and I'll find a way to do that. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries. That was the last slide. I'll share a 6-minute video in the chat too if you guys want to, on your own time, kind of check out a video of what our operation looks like. But yeah, next, I just have a couple QR codes that can direct people to our website, to our social media, and then there's also an Ecopreneurs. It's a 9-minute Salesforce video that really captures what we do here in Hawaii with ALDFG. And thank you guys very much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. Beautiful photos as always from PMDP. Thank you so much for sharing your work. And now we are ready to pass off to Kitty Daniels from the British Virgin Islands and Beyond the Reef.
Hey, thank you so much. That's quite a tough one to follow, I think. So yeah, my name's Kitty. I'm from Beyond the Reef. I'm the project coordinator. And Beyond the Reef is a marine conservation nonprofit based in the British Virgin Islands. And we do all sorts of different projects, but ghost gear removal is kind of one of our core projects that we've been doing right from the start. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, so Beyond the Reef started in 2018 after Hurricanes Irma and Maria, which obviously caused widespread devastation and the loss of a lot of fishing gear. And not just the loss of fishing gear for locals, but also an influx of fishing gear from the open water. So Beyond the Reef mobilized to kind of locate, remove, and dispose of this fishing gear. And since then, we've removed over 30,000 pounds of ALDFG from our shorelines, 20,000 from our reefs, bringing us to a total of just over 50,000 pounds. Next, please. Just wanted to talk briefly about how we locate the ghost gear. First of all, we have dedicated search days. So we have a small team but we will block out days to go out to the reef, and we will survey for a minimum of 5 hours, looking for ghost gear. Another really important one is community engagement. So this is when community members, normally fishermen, but also tourists and people on charter boats, they will alert us to ALDFG that they find on our shorelines or just floating in the channel. So that's a really important part of our removal process. And we also rely on our existing database to help us kind of inform where those most frequently inundated areas are. Next, please. These are just some images of our most common gear types that we come across. Mainly we're coming across trawling nets. We have found an increase in FADs last year, and we also find a lot of lobster pots. The lobster pots are most likely kind of have local origin, but the trawling nets and the FADs are coming from open water and yeah, landing upon our shores and reefs as well. Next. So I've split our removal methods into 3 different main categories. The first one is freediving and scuba. So this is kind of limited to our immediate team, where we will go out onto the reef with our boats and freedive or scuba for ALDFG. Freediving, some of the pros of it, you're wearing less equipment to become entangled. So in that sense, it can be safer. And because of that as well, it can be more efficient because you are taking up less space on your boat, meaning that you can load it with more ghost gear. But also, if you are not taking up your boat with scuba equipment, you can use smaller boats to navigate through the reefs. We also have a lot of shallow reef systems here, so smaller boats are really helpful. Another good thing about freediving and snorkeling is it allows us to cover a greater area. We can have one team being towed behind the boat and running transects, whilst another team is going onto the shoreline and swimming nets back from there, back to the boats. Obviously, scuba is really important in deeper water, and it's also best when those nets and that ghost gear is really entangled or embedded. Scuba allows you more time to remove those so that you avoid any further benthic damage. Next. Another method that we use is community cleanups. So we organize groups of between 20 and 30 individuals normally, and we choose a location based on our existing data set, and we take them there. And obviously that's really useful for covering larger areas and getting a greater kind of payoff from the cleanup. But it's also really good because it helps to keep the problem relevant in the minds of the community. We get a lot of tourists who are interested in getting involved, but mainly it's community members who keep coming back. And in that sense, it can be a really useful educational tool as well. I know we've had lots of volunteers who have lived here for 25 years who just weren't aware of the scale of the problem. And so community cleanups can not only be helpful for just removing ghost gear, but also for keeping it relevant and educating the community. One other thing that I wanted to talk about is the idea of a virtual cleanup. These are all obviously based on shore, but we occasionally will kind of advertise a cleanup, and people will split into teams and go and clean up an area that they want to. And then we will supply them with the tools to do so and go and pick up what they leave behind afterwards. So community engagement and relying on our community has been pretty essential to our project. Yeah, next, please. And something else that's been really helpful is our partnership with other organizations, specifically commercial dive services, who in the cases where our small team is just not able to remove things by hand and lift them onto the boats, they supply us with larger vessels, cranes, trained operators, captains, and commercial divers. So we wouldn't be anywhere near as effective without them. So partnering with willing organizations is a really helpful tool. Next. Just an example that kind of brings all of these elements together. We had one large net from Little Kamino Island, which is a very small island towards the north of the territory. We were alerted to it by a community member, and we sent just 2 of us to go and retrieve it. And we quickly realized that it was too big. And that's when we called in the commercial divers to come and help us out. They came over with their salvage vessel and helped us to delicately remove it from the reef and then tow it to deeper water. And we had to tow it back to base and use a crane to lift it onto the boat, and then the A-frame to actually weigh it. It came in at just over 3,000 pounds. And this is a nice one because the net was still in pretty good condition, so parts of it could be washed and prepared for recycling. Next. And then just another one. This was actually our last cleanup earlier this year, based on the Anegada Horseshoe Reef, which is where we get the majority of our ALDFG. We were alerted by a local fisherman, and this net was pretty old, pretty buried, and pretty covered. So it took us a lot longer to remove this. We used both free divers and scuba divers. And this one was unfortunately not in good enough condition to recycle, which brings me to my final slide, I think. Post cleanup. So what we do afterwards is we take data on the weight, location, and where those nets, for example, are not too tangled, we try and get dimensions. And obviously we record the gear type, which then helps us to inform our future cleanups. Suitable nets are cleaned and cut for recycling. We're currently in the process of filling a 40-foot container to be sent to Burio for recycling. This is a very labor-intensive process, of course. And in the past, we've kind of collaborated with local artists to make these nets into jewelry and decorative items. However, it's just not a long-term solution based on the amount of ghost gear that we're finding. Some problems that we do face here in the BVI is there's no viable recycling method for us. The main option is the incinerator, which we don't love. Stockpiling is what we've been doing, but it's not a long-term solution, especially as the influx is pretty constant here in the BVI. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening. That's just the rundown of our ghost gear project. And I look forward to any questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Kitty. I love the various approaches you have in getting the community involved at all different levels. Yeah, and I look forward to hearing questions at the end. Excellent. So our next speaker is going to be Bourton Scott from the Emerald Sea Protection Society.
There you go. Hello. Thanks for having me. I am a co-founder of the Emerald Sea Protection Society. We started in 2016. A little background on me. I am a commercial diver by trade and got involved with the recovery of ALDFG and marine debris from basically seeing it at work and doing some research and finding out that in BC we didn't really have a significant effort to tackle the problem here. So with a colleague of mine, we started the organization and over the years have kind of honed our approach to kind of look at this on a provincial scale. We're focused mainly in British Columbia. We've got 20,000 kilometers of coastline, variable conditions from protected waters to open ocean, and obviously variable weather and tidal conditions, which make all of this stuff pretty challenging on a case-to-case basis. We have a bunch of different fishing fishing techniques here, from seining, gill nets to the trap fisheries. So we deal with a variety of different types of gear, as well as quite a few derelict vessels and whatnot that have gone down over the years. So our approach is based on what we find from conversations with fishers, local knowledge, that type of thing, as well as using side scan sonar, diver, and ROV surveys to identify exactly what we're going after. And then our approach to the actual cleanup is with ROVs and commercial divers. We have a kit that, since we do have such a vast area to cover, we can put it into the back of a truck and deploy it onto any suitable boat or structure based on the project that we need to do. So I'll go through kind of like the simplest to the most complicated or gear intensive retrieval methods that we use and that we've kind of developed over the years. So my presentation is mostly just photos, so I'll just talk over that. So we'll go to the next one. So first off, fishing gear ends up in a variety of areas in the environment. We do see a fair amount on the shoreline. So probably the easiest methodology would be just going and cutting the net into smaller pieces for transport, depending on what you have for a boat or retrieval vessel. So cut it into smaller chunks, package it, and then transport to a vessel. So next photo. Again, this is just picking it up and hand bombing it to get it to a place to either package it and dispose. Next. Here, this net was pretty deep and in rough water, so it actually was easier for us to pull it up again by hand. So we used a rope from the boat and freed it from the reef using divers, and then again took it up by hand. Next photo. When we get to heavier stuff and when it's available, we like to use boats that have some sort of lifting apparatus. A lot of the fishing boats that we use have davits and cranes. So this is a small herring skiff that has an electric davit. The diver goes down. We use primarily surface supply diving, so we have a safety factor with the guy in the water. Obviously, fishing gear is high entanglement, so we want to make sure that we have everything in place to make sure that if the diver's entangled, we have contingency as well as a standby diver available to go help disentangle. For debris like this, we typically put lift bags on it as well to help free it from entanglement. This particular net was wrapped in a sunken vessel, so there was a fair amount of cutting and pulling that we had to do to free it, and then obviously onto the boat, packaged and sent for disposal. Next photo. Whenever we can, we like to use available fishing boats. So this is a 60-foot seiner that was owned by a local guy. This is in a remote community on the northern coast of BC. We like to use the fishermen as much as we can because they have knowledge of where the debris is, as well as equipment and expertise to recover it. So this boat had a 4-ton boom crane with hydraulics that we were able to bring out to recover, I think it was 10,000 pounds that day. So they're quite effective. Obviously, there's safety concerns with lifting with larger boats like this. So hard hats, pinch points, proper methodologies and whatnot, and communication are key when tackling projects of this scale. Next photo. This is an example of lift bag. So the diver goes down, ties a lift bag into the net, and then inflates the lift bag. We're able to reposition nets a lot of the time by doing this, as well as it's helpful to disentangle if it's on a reef or vessel. These can be quite dangerous depending on the project, because you end up putting the diver in a situation where there could be an uncontrolled descent. So having highly trained commercial divers and proper procedures in place with an understanding of what you're recovering is crucial to mitigate that hazard. Next. So again, here's a lift bag being used to lift crab pots that was actually underneath a barge. So we weren't able to get under there with the crane to lift it up. So we used the lift bag to get the traps neutrally buoyant, and then we moved it out from underneath the barge and recovered it that way. Next. Sometimes you run into scenarios where there's these large piles of net in the intertidal zone. Depending on where you are, this allows a unique possibility of using land-based lifting equipment. So with this particular net, we brought in a 60-ton crane to recover and process on shore. Next. So this is a photo of that. You can see the crane is in the foreshore area, and we are using it to lift it was around 60,000 pounds of end-of-life gear that was in the intertidal zone on the Fraser River. Again, this is potentially dangerous. The condition of the net was pretty poor, so, and mostly buried. So it you end up with scenarios like shock loading the crane, things falling out of the net onto the workers on the ground. So safety again is paramount, and good communication to make sure that everybody's safe when these activities are happening. Next. So this is just a video of, is this video uploaded?
This one I realized was a video, so my apologies again,
Okay.
James. But I did realize this one and the next one are video, so I'm happy to play it now if you want, Bourton.
Yeah, so this is just an example of what kind of a front-to-back dive recovery looks like for our group. So there's the diver with the lift bags, attaching it to the net. This is a sizable piece of aquaculture gear. Obviously, we've got ropes and everything. Diver filling up the lift bags. That's an example of a potential uncontrolled descent to the diver. That lift bag took off because the equipment released from the mud. Luckily, the guy was out of the way, but shows how potentially dangerous those are. And then again, the hydraulic lifting equipment pulling the net onto the boat, and then from there, package for disposal. So we use divers kind of to a maximum depth of 100 feet. It's potentially dangerous to go further than that in terms of dive-related injuries like burst lung syndrome or the bends. So we like to have that safety factor, especially if we are far away from medevac. So when that comes into play, we use an ROV with a grapple, which is used to, the ROV goes down, hooks into whatever we're trying to recover, and then the retrieval line is tensioned and brought up after the ROV releases it. So I don't know if this is going to work, but this is another video of that. This is a pretty challenging endeavor. ROVs like to get entangled in fishing gear, so we try to have a clear understanding of what we're recovering so that we have a good plan going into actually deploying the grapple. That being said, I have recovered many ROVs from different projects where we're recovering nets like this. So it can be quite an interesting sort of exercise in finesse, which is another reason why we chose the ROV system that we did to mitigate any potential hazard of putting divers in the water to recover it. If the ROV gets stuck in a situation where we deem it's not safe for divers to go and get it back, we'll try everything we can to get it. And then if it doesn't work, then unfortunately becomes part of the debris. Luckily, that hasn't happened yet, but it is something that we've identified as a potential hazard and problem with using ROVs. So something to keep in mind if this is a technique you're trying to employ in retrieval operations. And that's my presentation. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bourton, for sharing those videos and some details on the different ways ESPS has been removing fishing gear. And last but not least, I will hand it over to Buzz from Oceanswide.
Hi. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, as Kitty said, this is an amazing group to follow up on. It's kind of difficult to bring up the anchor, I guess. But we're Oceanswide. We're up in Maine, and we started our program. I was a fisherman and then became an ROV pilot and for research, and decided to come home and teach kids about ocean exploration. And while we were doing that, we came across the issue of ghost gear. And the next slide, please. So our kids, our students, and our campers were finding a lot of ghost gear on the shore. Next slide. I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly. So they were finding them in the woods. This is about 10 miles inland from the nearest fishing village. So it was obvious that they deliberately took these traps up into the woods, took them onto a dirt road, and threw them into the woods. We realized that this was a problem, and the kids said immediately, we've got to do something about it. So we jumped on board, not knowing a lot about all the other great organizations that are doing this kind of work around the world. It's an honor to be in the mix with you guys. So next slide, please. And the kids were wondering how many traps there were. So we just said, well, let's do the simple math. And these traps, these PVC coated wire traps have been in existence since 1984. And there are approximately 5,000 fishermen on the coast of Maine. They fish 800 traps on average, and they lose 10% of those per year. And so that over the last 45 years, they've lost about 16 million traps in the ocean, and that doesn't include the end-of-life gear that is on the shore and that you see piled up on the beaches. Next slide, please. Our divers and ROV pilots were going down, and they were seeing this kind of a mess on the bottom, and so we decided that we'd tackle the problem. Next slide. So we used our dive boat, and we take out 2 to 4 divers every day. We only dive in 60 feet of water because we are recreational divers, and we want to be as safe as possible. Next slide. So our divers go down. We use side scan sonar to locate the gear. You can see that top picture is a pile of traps to the right, and then a couple of singles dangling off to the end over to the left. We've got a Garmin side scan sonar. It's really a nice little rig for a small dive boat. And as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, we can pick up our divers on the sonar, and over on the left-hand side, you can see how we retrieve the gear. So our divers go down, they have their dive flag with them. One diver marks the trap or locates the trap. The diver with the dive flag pulls on the flag 3 times. I send down a messenger hook with a warp on it and buoys at the surface, and they clip in, make sure the trap is clear of all obstacles and hang downs, and they swim off to the next trap. There's so many traps here on the bottom of the Gulf of Maine that our divers in poor visibility can swim from trap to trap just visually. Next slide, please. So once the divers have marked the trap, the toggles are on, buoys and toggles are on the surface. We'll come around with our large vessel and we'll haul the traps up with the divers completely free and clear of any chance of getting snarled in the gear. They're 100 feet away, or they're on the surface by the time we're coming around to haul these traps up. Next slide, please. So in one harbor, we had a gentleman said that he would pay us as long as we were taking traps out of the water. And so we've been there for this will be our 4th year. And we've hauled 3,962 traps out of this harbor. 66% of those traps were still fishing, and 20% of the traps were still usable for the fishermen. So we would give them back to them. The key to this is having a good rapport with the fishermen. And so what we do is we give them back their traps. They're happy with us. They support us, and we continue doing what we're doing. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of all the traps that we've taken out of Boothbay Harbor. That's about, from top to bottom, that's about 4 miles. And the concentrations are unbelievable. The places where there aren't traps, where there aren't red dots, are the deeper water, and we haven't gotten to those yet, but we will be getting to those soon. There was one spot just to the northeast of Squirrel Island there, about the size of a football field, that we took 800 traps out of, and went back the next year and took another 100 out. So next slide, please. Down in the lower left, you see Boothbay Harbor. Up in the upper right, there's the Gouldsboro Trap Shop. And down in the middle here is Matinicus Island. So we have 3 locations right now that we're working to clean up on the shore, around the shore, and in the water. Boothbay is probably our sweet spot, if you should. And it's where we've retrieved most of our gear. Matinicus, we figure, has about 1 million traps around it. It's a small island, 2.5 miles by 1.5 miles. And we'll be working on that this summer, along with others that are circled here. And these are communities that have reached out to us and asked us to help remove the ghost gear from their communities. Next, please. So in Gouldsboro, we've succeeded with our goodwill towards the fishermen, and they are starting to bring us traps, end-of-life traps, rather than putting them in wet storage, as they call it, leaving them in the ocean to just rot away, which takes about 20 years. And they have brought us over 9,000 traps so far in the last 3 or 4 years. Next slide, please. So we work with the children in the fishing communities. This is another good way to get in with the fishermen. If you can do anything to help their kids, they're going to support you even more. And the kids tear down the traps, so they take all the plastic bits and pieces, any metal that they can, out of the traps. So all that's left is the wire mesh, the wooden runners, and a little bit of the netting inside. And then next slide. Then we have developed a crusher that we use to take the trap from the 2 foot wide to the next slide, please. So the standard trap is about 2 feet wide. That's the one on the right. The one on the left is the one that we've crushed, and it makes moving these traps around a lot more efficient. And once we're done with them, next slide, please. We take them to the recycling, and it costs us about $600 to process the traps, process a ton of traps. And if we're lucky, we get somewhere between $65 and $85 a ton to recycle them. So we're fast not getting rich. So next slide, please. A lot of the benefit that we get from this is the materials that we take out of these traps, the bricks, these ergo bricks that you see in the back of this truck. We can pass them on to the students that work with us. They can put them into new traps, and we can repurpose those pieces of equipment. So next slide, please. We a lot of times you get these ergo bricks, which are steel coated in PVC. On the right, we've got runners that are on the bottom of the trap, and those runners are $30 a piece. We can get those back to the manufacturers, and they can repurpose those in different traps. The aluminum, obviously, we can recycle. It's the plastic bits and pieces that we're having issues with. We haven't really found a way to process those and get those out of the environment, but we are working with the University of Maine. Next slide. And at the University of Maine, they have the Advanced Structures and Composite Center, where they have 2 of the largest 3D printers in the world, and they have used those printers to print boats. So I'm hoping that we can shred up all of this plastic gear and possibly make little skiffs and outboards for the fishermen, so that we can take their trash and turn it into something that's useful for them, and is something that lasts more than just a couple of years in the traps. Next slide, please. So if anybody's interested in coming to Maine this summer or fall, this is our schedule, and it is up on our website. So if anybody's in the neighborhood, please give us a holler and come out with us. That next slide is just our general information, and we thank you for allowing us to be part of this.
Wonderful. Oh, sorry, Buzz.
Nope, that's it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation, Buzz. I really love the incorporation of the students in the community. I think that's really, really special. So thank you to all of our presenters for showing such a really interesting variety of ways to remove fishing gear from a lot of different environments: shallow water, deep water, cold water, warm water, using all kinds of different tools, all kinds of different methods. That was really, really cool. So I would like to turn the conversation over to the audience for questions. And if
Really?
Oh,
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in. Really? I can't see if there's anything from the chat, but I have so many for so many of you, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. I just
I
want to
also
say,
have questions too.
like, it was just such an awesome series of presentations. I want to thank you all, first of all of our presenters for being here and presenting today, because I think you could look at the title of the webinar, this time Methods to Remove ALDFG from Aquatic Environments, and think that it would be quite similar. But for those of us that know the material, this is all very different. They were talking about different environments, different methods, different challenges that you're facing. It just really helps to underscore the nuance here when it comes to this. And also, I just want to give a round of applause, virtual applause to all of you for the work that you do. Let's Talk Ghost Gear is always just filled with my favorite people. This one is no different, and just the work and the dedication that you every one of you has to actually doing this work on the ground is just really inspiring, and I wanted to say that. So. I'll pause for a second because again, I don't want to dominate this. I do have some questions. See if anyone else has any thoughts that they'd like to get through before I start.
Hi, Doc. Mafalda here. Can you hear me okay? I'm tuning in from the car, but I have a question for all the speakers.
Loud and clear.
How does each organization feel they are doing with keeping up with the removal? Is this a constant influx that they see their work will have to carry on for the foreseeable future, or are they reaching a point where they're seeing less debris out in their environment or not?
Go ahead, Buzz.
Yeah. I think that this is going to take us probably 3 generations to clean up all the mess that is just here in the Gulf of Maine. We're scratching the surface with divers and in this shallow water. A lot of the gear, the fishermen are talking to us now and telling us about gear balls, which are huge piles of traps that have rolled together with the storms and what have you. And they can weigh, sometimes 5 tons, sometimes 25 tons. And I think that if we could find a way to get those out of the water, we would definitely start to make a difference. The fishermen are happy with what we're doing already, and that location that I told you about that was about the size of a football field, they started fishing in there again, and they were telling us that it was a wonderful thing to have that opened up again because they are catching lobsters there. Pardon me, and they're just happy that it's clean again.
And then I can jump in real quick, but Mafalda's one of our great partners at the Center for Marine Debris Research and Plastic Research Recycling Facility here in Hawaii. And so she's able to process nearly 100 tons of our waste to create infrastructure here in Hawaii. And as Mafalda knows, we are not seeing less debris. And so for each 30 days that we're out there, we're removing about 7,000 pounds per day with our team of 16 divers. We could be out there year round, essentially removing a lot of this derelict fishing net. However, we are on year 4 of a 5-year mitigation plan to remove all the legacy debris out there. And so we hope that by 2026, we'll be able to remove all the historic debris. And then we'll be working with just the new influx of marine debris, which was estimated at 115,000 pounds annual. But we know that estimate in 2005 is grossly underestimating what we're actually accumulating. Thank you.
Sure. I agree a lot with Buzz. I mean, we work with the lobster gear a lot in Atlantic Canada, and as Buzz said, there's decades of loss out there. I mean, we were very fortunate in Canada to have a Ghost Gear Fund that gave a real good shot in the arm to cleanups, which I think opened up a lot of eyes to the extent of debris that really is out there. Until you start bringing it up to the surface, it's really just, one of those things that people can't see and it's easy to ignore. But, we brought a lot of gear up that's very, very old. So obviously that's out of the water, which is good. And I know that in the past few years, DFO has implemented reporting of lost gear. So there's a lot more fishermen that are reporting their losses, which is improving the situation. But, there's still a lot of gear down there on the bottom, and a lot of work to do. I mean, it's still lost, a yearly basis. There's losses piling up, so nowhere near complete.
Yeah, and pretty much same here in the BVI. We have a almost constant influx, and with every storm event, it gets pretty much worse and worse. And on top of that, we've only really literally scratched the surface. We don't have access yet to the really deep water, and I think once we do, we're going to definitely find some quite shocking amounts of ghost gear. So I do see this project going on for a long while until the damage already done can be cleaned up, but also the root cause can be addressed.
Yeah, and as far as BC goes, it's very much the same. Like there's, I would say provincially, we're not seeing much of a difference, but locally, since most of the gear that we're finding is legacy anyway, the legacy gear being cleaned up, you go back to those areas again, and you're not seeing an accumulation of new equipment. So we are seeing it kind of on a small scale impacts and the environment kind of rebounding after it's been recovered, but there is a lot more to address. So one thing at a time.
Great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Buzz.
Yeah, I had a question for you guys at Triple GI. Do you have a tally of all the gear that your members have taken out of the water?
Well, we have an extremely rough estimate. Oh, sorry, Joel. Did you
No,
want to
no,
go?
not at all. Please go ahead.
I don't actually remember the estimate off the top of my head, but as part of so if people might remember that I did send out an annual membership survey. I think it was at the end of last year or the beginning of this year. And in there, I had asked how much fishing gear our members have removed from the ocean and other aquatic environments. So that's what that question is all about, because that's something we get asked all the time. So I will just have to check in my notes for that like extremely rough number. And I think going forward, we'll continue asking that question on our annual membership survey, but in a more organized way with like specific units and stuff. But I'm going to check my notes for that number and then I will pop it in the chat.
Thanks, Kitty. Yeah, and another thing to consider is just that that number will be an extremely lowball estimate, I think, only because we just haven't received information from everyone yet. And I know how difficult that can be. You know, emails and surveys get buried in inboxes. I'm guilty of it myself all the time. But that is something we'd like to make a more concentrated effort to try to get at. And of course, we also need to be cognizant that the way that Triple GI would present such a number is not that this is what Triple GI has done ourselves, but this is what the collective impact of the entire 150 member organization collective has been able to achieve. And I think if we can actually get to what that number is, it would probably blow people's minds because they start like, listening to the folks that were on the line today. It's an amazing amount of work that's gone into pulling these things up, and credit to everybody as well today. The imagery that you guys have been able to come up with as well, because a picture tells 1,000 words. We all know that. It really helps illustrate this because Colin, you just mentioned a moment ago too, and I've said this for years, is that people don't see this problem for the most part. Most of it is subsurface. They have no idea what this work looks like. So that type of imagery that all of you have been able to provide about what this looks like in different environments around the world is incredibly compelling. So if there's a way for us to help leverage that, of course, in context as well, giving appropriate photo credit to everyone, but we want to make sure that we're able to more effectively communicate what this actually looks like. And these are the organizations around the world doing it. So I think, what we saw in the webinar today will probably be a good way to do that, but we're open to finding new ways to do that as well, because I really think that helps spark people and start to understand why this is so important. Okay, I think sorry, and Buzz, yeah, did you want to?
Oh, no, I was just going to say for your notes, I just did a rough estimate myself. And it looks like we pulled out about 650,000 pounds in the last 3 years.
Yeah, so Katie's put thank you very much for that, Buzz. Katie's put the number, and again, this is what we've received so far, which is by no means close to, I think, what has actually come out. And mind you, not all Triple GI members will be removing gear as well, so we need to take that into consideration. But I think it's just over 8,000 metric tons. But again, that is a lowball estimate, I'm sure, because this is not from a huge amount of respondents at this point. So I would be very safe to say considerably higher than that. Yeah, but thanks for popping that in there, Katie. I think we have another couple questions in the chat there, Katie. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, of course. I see Michael popped a question in the chat here about a group that coordinates the learning from all these different organizations, looking like knowledge sharing on methods might be useful. I might, Joel, do you want to take a stab at this question?
I was going to say, I'd like to think that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And this is one of the methods of doing exactly that. But I think the question is also getting at if there is something a little bit more purposeful around this. And I think we do have a document that was done by natural resources consultants on the GGG website a while back in our resources section that is specifically on methods to locate ALDFG, if not necessarily methods to remove it. So maybe that's something that we can look at doing is partnering, getting some input from some of the folks on the line today and putting something together as a sort of GGG knowledge product, highlighting some of our member organizations that are doing this work and the work that they're doing and highlighting them as case studies in a specific document like that. I think that could be useful. Again, we have one for methods to locate that's outdated now, I think, by a few years, but it's a good suggestion. And I think that's something that this group would, this group being the GGG, would be interested in potentially developing for sure. If there's interest from groups on the line in contributing to something like that, that is. So I don't want to speak for folks now, but it's something we should definitely look into.
All right, and then moving on here, it looks like Claudia has a question for PMDP. Is there a reason why PMDP doesn't use lift bags? Is that because of the depth, or was there another reason?
Yeah, that's correct. Most of our nets are actually either found floating at the surface or within 0 to 10 feet of depth. A lot of the material that we find comes from North Pacific fisheries, which have polypropylene or polyethylene fishing nets, which are a big floating net mass. And so as they float in, either positively or neutrally buoyant into these atolls, they'll snag up on the reef. And the reef is so shallow and expansive that a lot of times they'll just sit there and they'll biofoul and they'll kind of cement themselves onto the reef, or they'll get too heavy and they'll roll off the reef shelf. But they're no deeper than 30 feet typically. We also don't use much compressed air diving. We do have that as a backup option. But right now we're trying to develop a way that we can kind of bring a lot of these nets from like 30 feet to the surface, kind of packaged in a floating way, so we could tow it out to deeper water and then use our extraction platform to lift the things whole. So we're looking at, like an inflatable boat that you can kind of roll up underneath and use cylinders to inflate it while it's at the bottom, and then it'll bring it all the way up to the surface, drain, and then we're able to tow it out through the maze because it's really tricky to navigate those complex coral reefs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. Great. And then we have another question here in the chat from Mafalda. Other than funding, are there any ways that this community can help you all in your efforts, or is fundraising really the main way so that you can keep doing the incredible work that you do?
I mean, funding, go ahead, Buzz.
No, go ahead, Colin.
I mean, funding obviously, and, getting out on a boat and burning fuel and employing people to do this type of work obviously takes some funding. But I mean, I think, everyone that's on the call, obviously we're here talking about it. And, the more, I guess, attention that everybody can bring to the issue and trying to educate others, it's obviously going to help, solutions grow. So, I mean, I know in Nova Scotia, there's one group in particular that will take any volunteer out almost any weekend of the year to go out and clean up a beach somewhere in Nova Scotia, right? Scotian shores. So there is ways that people can get involved without, obviously contributing funding. So that's it.
Yeah, go ahead, Buzz.
Yeah, as Colin said, that's come on out with us, join the party, and it would be great if we could act as one group to do some fundraising and actually include that education in there to get it out to the folks that that could help fund these kinds of things. I've worked with a bunch of different folks. Most of them are very wealthy, and they have the money that they can go out and buy their. David Packard just bought a $125 million boat, and we can't do that. But it would be nice if we could reach out to those folks and have them support the kind of work that we're doing. They're researching the ocean, they're documenting the issues, but very few of them are actually supporting the cleanup. And it'd be nice if we could get them involved. So reach out to your friends and folks that you never know who knows who, and let them know the good work that Triple GI is doing.
Thank you, Buzz. I might just pop in from the Triple GI perspective really quickly as well, is that, I mean, funding is always something that every one of these organizations, including ourselves, is always going to need to continue to do the work. But really, these types of community engagement opportunities I find so interesting. I learn so much every time I talk to Triple GI members, doesn't matter where they're from or what they're doing. It's just constant learning. And these type of knowledge sharing opportunities, I think, are incredibly important to build the community. And so, Katie, I know you've also been looking for other ways to engage Triple GI members, whether it's through our academic focus group or whether it's through Let's Talk Ghost Gear like this, and just trying to maximize those opportunities, I think is really important as well. And that knowledge sharing and information transfer is just really, really good. And I will plug it one more time, data. If we can get the data from folks that goes into our data portal for one element, but also just sort of trying to quantify how much has been removed. All of these different things really help with policy asks and things like that, as well as unlocking funding. If you can really demonstrate the magnitude of a collective impact of an organization made up of other organizations like yourselves that has an impact like this around the world, that can help unlock dollars, that can help unlock political will to dedicate more resources towards doing this type of work and supporting it in a variety of different ways. So just wanted to throw that out there from the Triple GI perspective as well. Because the more support that we get, the more we can support organizations like those who are on the line today. And Richard, I'm just reading your comment there, and Katie, I see you've replied to it as well. Yes, this is crucially important and something that we would encourage. And for those of you who aren't able to read the chat if you're on a mobile device or something, is talking about documenting the circumstances where fishing area or grounds or species actually show a rebound directly tied to ALDFG removal. There have been some instances of that. I think there's another one, I think, Katie, from, I'm not sure if that's the one. Oh no, that's the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. There's also another one from the Pacific Northwest. I think NRC did one a while back from Puget Sound and that sort of an area. But that type of documentation, 100% agree with you. It's so important to just, again, show people that this work isn't just about pretty pictures and amount of pounds removed and stuff like that, especially because the mass as well, that's something that we've been working on. Again, another thing we've been doing with NRC is working on what does mass actually translate into impact? Because, you might have a very light gill net, for example, which, very fine mesh, which is floating in the water column and might spread out over a huge area, but weigh comparatively less than if you're pulling out, 50 or 100 different traps, which isn't to minimize the impact there, but they're not a 1-to-1 ratio. So trying to figure out how do we quantify impact across different gear types and different environments that might weigh different things and have different potential impacts. So, all of this is connected, and just making sure that we try to quantify the impact of all of this. It's a difficult thing to do, but we are working on that.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Listen, the reason I ask some of that and make some of these comments is, so my name is Richard Graves. I'm with Nestle. Nestle has a big project on ocean regeneration, and it's a big corporate buzzword right now. And I think that this work really feeds into that concept of ocean regeneration. And so we're aligned with kind of this corporate thought process, which I think works in favor of ghost gear removal. My background, I've been in the seafood industry about 40 years, and I spent a lot of time at sea, and I saw a lot of ghost gear, a lot go in the water. And I suppose I have a guilty conscience about that. because certainly it was a thing that was unconscious for such a long time that and the gear goes in the water and you don't worry about it. I've queried some of my old cohorts in North America in the US, not just North America, asking questions about mandatory gear loss reporting. That's a kind of that sticks in my craw. I really admire DFO in Canada for having a mandatory, well, it's part of getting your license. You have a requirement to report gear loss. And there's no such thing in North America, or I keep saying that, in the United States. I asked the fleet manager that I used to work with. He said he uses the same form for lost gear as he does for man overboard, which basically means he never uses that form. And so it's basically a black hole. And it makes me nuts that we don't require that for U.S. fishers to report lost gear. And somebody at my door keeps ringing my doorbell. But and I wish we could change that, because I do think we've got to spend a lot of time, as you said, Kitty, on root cause. We've got to get fishermen on board to say, I don't want to lose gear, and if I did lose it, here's where it is. And that kind of also goes back to where things have worked and restored helps make that case for fishermen. So in any case, thank you for all your presentations and all the work you all are doing. I think it's great, and keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for being here. I think that it's important to have more industry engagement, and these discussions are important. And again, at the end of the day, everyone here knows that generally speaking, fishers don't want to lose their gear. You know, nobody wants that to happen. It's a cost to them to replace the gear. It's a cost for the species that they could otherwise be harvesting that might get caught in it. So I really think that that's one of the unique things about this particular ocean issue, if you want to call it that, is that this is something that can be genuinely collaborative in nature. We work with fishers on every project that we work on personally in some way, shape, or form, whether we're using their boats like in Bourton's case at ESPS, or whether we're surveying them. Kitty and her team at Beyond the Reef have been doing fisher surveys to try to get understandings of what's going on out there. And Buzz, you've mentioned your work. I know, Colin, you've been working with fishers. James, I'm sure it's the same, although trying to find which fishers you should be talking to, which is a whole other question about where that gear comes from, because a lot of it's probably not being used in the Hawaiian Islands. But it's a key part of the discussion. So thank you very much for those comments, and thanks for being here. I know that we are butting up to time. I did have one quick question that I wanted to throw out there. And specifically, I think James and Kitty, you guys had mentioned this in particular, but much of what you're finding is polyethylene, polypropylene trawl gear. Whereas, we've looked at the likelihood of loss for gear that's like that. And trawl has traditionally not rated super highly, certainly midwater trawl. It has to get caught on something in order for it to break loose, generally speaking. Bottom trawl would be a bit of a different story that makes constant contact with the ground. But this is the majority of what you're finding, correct? Is trawl gear, and I think James, you would also mention seine gear. Is that correct?
Yes.
I will say that all of our nets are conglomerates of all different types, though.
Right.
And so it does mix in the different convergence zones and patches and makes its way as like a big mass. But primarily, yes, I think trawl netting is just one of the more predominant net types in the North Pacific Ocean near us.
Okay. And I know that Mafalda, you and your team at CMDR have been trying to identify as well where some of these nets are coming from, and also been at your recycling center, from what I remember when we were back there visiting last year, that you can identify where nets have been cut, where these are probably discards, right? Where you've been repairing a trawl net at sea or something like that, it's been cut and has been tossed over, as opposed to something that broke due to a snag or something like that. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, is that something that is probably is accurate to say that you guys can make that kind of identification?
I would say that we can identify whether it's been
disposed purposefully or accidentally. It's tough to say, especially because with the removal efforts, when they have to be cut into smaller pieces to be put onto boats, which makes it hard. But we can identify general regions where the nets have originated from. For example, we know that everything that washes up in Hawaii is not used by Hawaiian fisheries. It is all external derelict fishing gear that washes up around the Hawaiian archipelago. Based on the net construction, we can identify that a lot of it comes from Asia. It's not the type of fishing nets that are used by Alaskan fisheries or possibly even South American fisheries. It is tricky to know whether it's been purposefully disposed or accidentally lost during fishing operations at the moment. But that is something that we're trying to identify as we receive more gear from PMDP, from other partners. As we know that it's not from Hawaii, we're trying to see, can we start to tell that it's been purposefully chucked in the ocean or accidentally lost based on the other gear that's also attached to it.
Yeah, it's good to know. I just think it would be really interesting to start to maybe connect with everyone here about more of the data and starting to chat through what this data could actually mean, especially when we're looking at doing potential revisions to some of our other knowledge products, our best practice frameworks, things like that, as we will continue to do over time, as and when we can. But just to sort of get, a more general understanding of what's being pulled out and when, what type of gears we're encountering. And there's no way, Kitty, James, to really tell whether what you're seeing is a midwater trawl versus a bottom trawl, correct? Like, I'm going to assume that most of it's bottom trawl, but maybe I'm wrong in that assumption, and I wouldn't want to make that as an assumption. I would rather know. And I don't know if there's a way to identify those different things.
Yeah, we have not been trained to identify those in the field, at least. I think it's going to take a lot more forensics to kind of separate them and look at them to decide that, but we just don't have the resources, unfortunately, and the time out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for us, a lot of the time, the nets that we're finding have been at sea for a really long time. So they are starting to lose all sort of structural integrity. And so it becomes really difficult to kind of figure out what they were being used for and therefore where they might be coming from. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Buzz, you had your hand up there too.
Yeah, as an old fisherman, way back 40 years ago, I could probably help you with that if you could send some pictures. I could maybe. Are you finding any large rollers that would? So typically the bottom trawls, they have the rollers on the bottom, and you'll if they get hung down, which is more the case than the midwater ones, you'll probably find those bottom lines with the rollers on them.
Hi, Buzz.
I'd be happy to educate with anybody that's has some questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Buzz. I'll follow up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll send over some photos.
Wonderful.
I think that's another good thing to consider, as well as where people have knowledge and expertise on fishing gear itself. How do we start to, do some of this forensics? So happy to make some of those connections with those who we have within the fishing community as well, to try to get an understanding. I know that CMDR has been trying to do that as well, and others as well, but it's mostly been small scale. So if there's a way that we can assist with that, then let me know. Anyway, I've been talking too much, Katie. We're 5 minutes past the hour. I don't know what you'd like to do. I don't know if folks want to stay on, if there's any other questions, but I feel I've been talking entirely too much. I just can't help it. Such an interesting topic. Katie, I'll toss back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your participation today. Thank you to our speakers and to all the folks who came in to listen. If people have a bit more time, I do have like one more question. However, I know we're already past the time, so if people do need to go, please feel free. But yeah, I just wanted to say big thanks to everybody for participating today, and thank you again for all of our speakers. And if you have time, I have one more question for you. Okay, so looks like some people do have time. So hi, so for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Katie. I'm the membership specialist at the Global Ghost Gear Initiative. And one of my roles is to kind of keep on top of what all of our members are up to. But another role I play is meeting people who would like to become new members, and also trying to network our members with each other because we do have such a global membership base. So my question is, what advice would you give an organization who is just starting to do gear retrievals? And what challenges did you experience at the beginning and how did you overcome them?
I can go first, I guess. Some good advice would be to, I guess, do your homework before you go out on the water and start spending time and funding and effort. You can put yourself, I mean, I'm talking along the lines of survey, locating and retrieving ghost gear, which is what our goal is. You can put yourself quite a ways ahead before you even hit the water by doing things like talking to fishers, by doing research on, the causes of lost gear in your area. Obviously mining like DFO, triple GI databases, lost gear reporting. There's a lot of homework that can be done, for fairly low cost, minimal effort, really on your computer or on the phone, to put yourself in a good position that when you do get to the water and you're going to go out and you're going to do, 2-3 days of work or 2-3 months of work, but that time you're going to spend on the water is going to be much more efficient if you put your, time in before you get there. So.
Yeah, I'll echo what Colin said too. I think doing your homework, like 90% of success is all in the preparation. And so understanding what your problem is and then understanding where the risks and hazards are in your operation and then trying to see that through developing a safety program, standard operating protocols, and a really rigorous training program for how to make sure that you guys are doing that efficiently. And I would say for us as a really small nonprofit organization, we've really stuck to our core mission, which is removing derelict fishing nets off coral reefs. We haven't really tried to expand outside those bounds. Also working in Papahānaumokuākea, we really specialize in those coral reefs. I've been working out there for the last 15 years, being able to lead and manage the project for NOAA Fisheries at the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center before we converted to the nonprofit organization. So I guess really sticking to what you know and the strengths and trying not to stretch yourself too thin.
I'd like to add that, sorry, Burton, did I step on you?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that, I've been doing this for a long time, but talking to Colin and Bourton, I learned from them a lot of things that have helped us along the way. And James and Kitty, I'm going to have to come visit you guys in Hawaii and down in the Caribbean because, I'm sure that there's something that I need to learn from you too. So look for a guy that's looks like he's from Maine. But the thing is that if we could, somehow share a little bit of expertise. Colin is amazing with his side scan sonar, with the ROVs, with the surveys that he does. If others could learn about that, first and foremost, before they go out and buy stuff, there are different types of vehicles and systems that you could purchase that do a much better job than others. And if we could pull together some kind of a brain trust to share our knowledge with anybody that would like to. It's a big ocean out there. We've got to train up others to keep doing the work that we're doing.
Yeah, as far as my input on that, we were fortunate enough to start the organization around the same time that the triple GI became a thing as well, and that was definitely one of the deciding factors to our success is just the access to the breadth of knowledge from different groups working basically across the planet. So any suggestion for people coming into this world, I always refer them to the triple GI as as a really good first step to hone that specific project focus and equipment list that you need to get started.
And if I can, I'd just I agree, kind of doing your homework, doing your research before, but also getting the local community on side, because I think they really are the kind of ultimate fountain of knowledge about this kind of stuff. You know, what are they seeing? For us, the fishermen, they're out on the water all day, every day. So many of our kind of tip-offs and so much advice has come from them. So get the community engaged, I think is really important.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering my question. That will be very helpful for me when I'm chatting with new members as well. Okay, I see Joel has oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm dominating this too, Joel, and more so than you. But a quick question for the other four. Are you finding it pretty easy to communicate with the fishermen? Are they getting involved like you'd like them to?
I would say most of the ones that we deal with in Atlantic Canada are, especially, I think the first year that the Ghost Gear Fund kind of took off, there was a bit more resistance because they weren't really sure what the outcome would be there. But, you know, they're all fairly used to seeing groups like us working in their areas. They know what we're up to. They know that we're, you know, there's not going to be some sort of penalty for us finding their gear. So, yeah, I mean, we get a lot of tips, especially if we're on the water in an area and we're bringing gear in. All of a sudden, we're starting to get text messages and tips on where to look. And, you know, I think they're pretty open to, you know, working with us, and they see the benefits of it, especially when they start to find out, you know, that how many lobsters we're putting back in the ocean, you know,
Right.
then they really open their eyes and get on board. So we haven't had too many issues with any fishers. We work with them most of the time.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. Like, we initially, it was a bit of a challenge to get their input, but over the years that this project's been kind of ongoing, and you've seen more of the rollout with news sources and stuff like that. There's a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, and also an understanding of how crucial their input is to the success of these projects. So we definitely have a lot more buy-in from fishermen as well over the last probably 4 years.
For us at Beyond the Reef, we also do a lot of we do a lot of other projects, but one of them is kind of kids education days, and those are all for local children. So we take them out and we give them these kind of educational experiences. And it's like you said, Buzz, it really helps to if you take care of the local people and the local kids, then having an easy relationship becomes possible.
And then for us, Buzz, the predominant fishery here in Hawaii is the longline fishing industry, and we don't ever really come across their gear. And so we don't really interact with the longline fishers. We do rely on our federal partners at NOAA to connect us with the North Pacific fisheries that use trawl and purse seine gear, but we've been largely unsuccessful. One, because we stick to just the removal side of things. But we would like to rely on GGGI to actually connect us, because I think like an exchange program or some kind of education program where we are visiting them, we learn why they are losing gear or discarding gear, and we send like a leader from the fishing industry over here so they can experience what we're kind of catching on our end, would be incredible. But we haven't had that opportunity really to interact with the fishermen with the gear that we're recovering.
That's really interesting, James, because I mean we've done workshops that include fishers in various places around the world. We have not done one in Hawaii yet, but you know, I tell you, the first time I get an opportunity to do that, then I'll be on the next plane over there. But I think that bringing groups like yours, those who are doing the recovery work, NGOs, people who are doing data collection, academics, policymakers, and the fishers in the room to all have conversations. We have seen nothing but huge amounts of success come out of those workshops, because those people don't often talk to one another, as you say, and making those connections so that you can just call up, Joe or Bill or whoever it is to say, okay, I've got a question about this. That's what I think the real purpose of those types of events are. So, barring that, because you never know when we're going to be able to do our next one, and where it will be. But even if we can do something like that and convene some folks virtually, if we can find a way to do that, I think that'd be another good way to facilitate some sort of knowledge exchange. We'd have to keep the agenda on something like that fairly concise because no one wants to spend 8 hours on Zoom. But if we can have some very specific questions that we want to go through and have the right targeted people there, we can look at potentially doing something like that as well if there would be value in that. And then, of course, anytime we're doing any type of workshop like that in the area, we just invite everybody who's based there to participate where we can. So.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending a little extra time with us today. I just popped my email in the chat just in case folks don't have it. If you have any other questions, ideas, feedback, whatever about Let's Talk Ghost Gear, send me an email. If you have questions in general, ideas for virtual events, roundtables, etc., send me an email. Questions about the data portal, you can send me an email about that. So again, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our wonderful presenters who are from all over the world, various different time zones. And thank you for your participation. And we will catch you at the next Let's Talk Ghost Gear. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Thanks so much again.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.